there are stories that people tell themselves is funny. A close call, retold at sleepovers, laughed about years later because everything turned out okay and the distance makes it easier to breathe. But sometimes, years after the fact, you start to look back at the pieces and realize the shape of what they formed. And the funny story stops being funny. Tonight's story comes from a woman who was 12 years old when a man decided that an all-girls dance camp was somewhere he needed to be, again, and again, and again. This is her story, in her own words. She was 12, a competitive dancer of 9 years. During the summer, her studio went on a camp retreat. Just the girls, platform tents with real beds, a packed campground with plenty of people around. Within a few hours of arriving, things got strange. She was on dinner duty and didn't see it herself, but her friends told her later. A young man had approached the girls at the campfire and started making comments about their appearance. When one of them refused to go with him, he swore at her. Then he grabbed a large amount of their firewood and disappeared. They told themselves he was probably just being an asshole, playing a prank. They moved on. That night, the group headed to a large cabin about a mile down the road for a game night. In the middle of a card game, the room went quiet. She looked up, and there was a young man standing in the doorway. She didn't know yet that it was the same man from the campfire. Only half the girls did. Their teacher had no idea who he was. He was holding a dog. She loves animals. Her instinct was to get up and go say hello. She stood, started walking toward him, and then her gut dropped. She sat back down immediately. She couldn't explain why. Something about him made her unable to move closer. Their teacher asked what he was doing there. He said he just wanted to say hi. He stayed in the doorway for about 10 minutes, watching the room before he finally left. The next day, they started noticing a truck driving past their campsite, slowly, multiple times an hour. It was him. By now, everyone knew who he was, including their teacher. The teacher's response was to tell the girls he was probably just friendly, but to stay in groups. That night, they returned to the cabin. He walked through it several times. They ignored him. Around 11, she and the 3 other girls her age asked to walk back to the campsite and go to sleep. Their teacher said yes and let them go alone. It was pouring rain, pitch dark. She kept telling her friends not to worry, that he probably just wanted company, just like their teacher said. But they still looked over their shoulders the whole way. Halfway back, they noticed a figure behind them. Same walk, same build. She says she has never run that fast in her life. They made it to the tent. She dove under the bed. She lay there watching the tent flap, waiting for it to open. Then she thought about her friends. She crawled back out. She grabbed something heavy. They waited. He didn't come through the flap. Her friend decided to check if the coast was clear. She went with her. She wasn't going to let her go alone. When they stepped onto the edge of the platform, he was 5 feet away from them. His back was turned. He was scanning the campground, methodically, deliberately, like he was looking for something or someone. At one point, she thought she made direct eye contact. He didn't see her, or he didn't react. Eventually, he left. They waited on that platform until everyone came back. She says she still doesn't know what he wanted. She's told this story as a funny anecdote for years. But she's starting to realize she may have narrowly avoided something terrible. Here is what I keep coming back to in this story. Not the man in the doorway, though he is terrifying enough. Not the figure in the rain, or the moment she was 5 feet from someone scanning the dark campground for a way into a tent full of 12-year-olds. What I keep coming back to is the teacher. A man showed up at the campfire on the first night and tried to convince a girl to come with him. He took their firewood. He appeared again the next night, standing in a doorway, watching a room full of children for 10 minutes. He drove past their campsite multiple times every single hour the next day. He walked through the cabin that night while they were inside, and at every point, the teacher's response was, "He's probably just friendly." Stay in groups. She let 4 12-year-olds walk a mile back through a dark, rain-soaked campground at 11 at night, knowing full well that this man had been circling them for 2 solid days. Think about the specific sequence of his appearances. First, the campfire, an open test. Will an adult intervene? The answer was no, and he learned it. Then the cabin doorway, 10 minutes. Long enough to study the room, to map who was where. Then the slow circles in the truck, surveillance in daylight, with no attempt at concealment. He wanted them to see him. And then the cabin again, walking through it while they were inside, not speaking, just walking through to see where they would be later and how many of them would be leaving alone. Every single one of those appearances was a calculation. He was learning, testing what he could do and what would happen when he did it. And the answer, every time, was nothing. I want to be fair to the teacher. People in authority are often the last to escalate because escalation feels dramatic and they don't want to be wrong. They tell themselves the most generous story because the alternative is almost too large to hold. But the 4 girls who ran through the rain knew. The girl who stood up to pet the dog and sat back down knew. The girl who lay under the bed watching the tent flap knew. The girl who grabbed something heavy in the dark knew. Children almost always know before the adults in the room are willing to admit it. What frightens me most about this story isn't the unresolved ending. It's the resolved part. The part where every adult present saw what was happening and chose again and again not to act. And those 4 girls made it home anyway. Not because anyone protected them, but because they protected each other. There are only 12 comments on this post. Most of them say the same thing. Why didn't the adults do anything? She doesn't have an answer, and I don't think she's looking for one anymore. Some questions about the adults who were supposed to protect you don't have answers that help. One commenter referenced the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders, a case from 1977 in which 3 young girls were killed at a summer camp. The comparison isn't made to be dramatic. It's made because the pattern is recognizable. An isolated group, children, night, a man who had been circling, testing, watching, and adults who decided each time to do nothing. She still remembers his face. After 6 years, that hasn't changed. She'll never know what he wanted. And that, in its own quiet way, is its own kind of haunting. Some threats announce themselves. They arrive with noise, with violence, with something unmistakable. And some threats stand in a doorway holding a dog, waiting to see if anyone is going to stop them. Nobody did. But those girls did something more important. They stayed together. They ran when they needed to. And they kept watch over each other until the danger passed. More whispers are coming. Follow Wren so you never miss one. I'll see you in the shadows.